Welcome back to the Shigeaki Podcast, where we break down the habits that either build resilience or quietly erode it, especially after 60. I want to start today with a patient story that might sound familiar. Her name is Jean. She's 68, retired teacher, sharp mind, warm heart. She came to see me for mild fatigue and blood pressure that had slowly crept up. Her lifestyle, pretty solid. Walked 30 minutes every day, cooked at home, didn't smoke. And every afternoon, she had her favorite snack, a handful of mixed nuts. She told me proudly, Dr. Hyman, I gave up chips and cookies. Now, I just eat nuts, almonds with honey, cashews, some sunflower seeds, the healthy stuff. But her blood pressure kept rising, cholesterol levels weren't improving, and there was low-grade inflammation in her labs that didn't quite add up. So I asked her to bring in the bag. It was labeled Heart Healthy Nut Blend. But when I turned it over, it was loaded with sodium-added sugar, refined oils, and artificial flavors. And that's the problem we're talking about today. You think you're eating healthy? But some good foods are quietly working against your heart. That includes several popular types of nuts and seeds that many people eat daily, thinking they are protecting their health, when in fact, they may be raising blood pressure, inflaming vessels, and stressing the heart. Which brings us to our topic, 5 seeds and nuts that may harm your heart after 60 and 5 that can help it beat stronger, longer. And joining me as always is the man whose wisdom guides this podcast, a neurologist, author, and teacher of healthy aging, who, at over 100 years old, continues to show us what true longevity looks like. He is someone who's seen not just thousands of patients, but generations of lives shaped by small choices repeated over time. Please welcome Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara.
Thank you, Dr. Hyman. And thank you to everyone listening today. At my age, people often ask, Doctor, what's the most important thing I can do for my heart? They expect me to say exercise, or medicine, or something big. But I tell them this, watch what you do every day, and especially what you put in your mouth. Without thinking, that includes the small things, like a handful of nuts while watching TV, or a flavored trail mix you bought because the label said natural. In Japan, we respect seeds and nuts, but we treat them with care. Not all are harmless, not all are helpful, and many lose their value once processed. So today, I hope we can clear the air and help people understand which nuts and seeds support heart health, which ones quietly strain it, and how small adjustments can protect not just the heart, but the entire vascular system.
Or that's exactly what we'll do. In this episode, you'll learn the common mistakes people make with healthy nuts, especially after 60, and 5 types of seeds, and nuts that may worsen blood pressure, inflammation, or arterial health, and 5 powerful alternatives that support circulation, lower triglycerides, and strengthen your heart from the inside out. We'll also guide you through how to prepare seeds so your body actually absorbs their benefits, when to eat them for best results, and how to slowly replace the bad ones without giving up flavor or joy. Because it's not about cutting everything out, it's about knowing what to keep and what to leave behind.
You are not too old to protect your heart, but your heart may be too old to keep tolerating what you once ignored. That's the shift after 60. The body becomes less forgiving, and our choices must become more intentional. Let's begin.
Before we talk about which seeds are helpful and which are harmful, let's make one thing clear. After 60, your heart becomes more sensitive to what you eat. Not because it's weak, but because it's worked for decades pumping over 100,000 times a day. As we age, the arteries stiffen slightly. Blood pressure regulation becomes trickier, and the body doesn't handle sodium-damaged fats or excess sugar the way it once did. So, when someone eats a handful of salted, sweetened, or heavily processed nuts every day, it adds up. What looks harmless, a small snack, slowly becomes a source of inflammation, water retention, and vascular stress.
Yes, and what's dangerous is not always what you feel immediately. Many older adults eat these nuts and say, I don't feel anything, no chest pain, no reaction. But damage to the heart doesn't always come with a warning. It builds over time through the lining of the vessels, through blood pressure spikes, through the overwork of circulation. And that's what most people misunderstand about food. It's not just about how it makes you feel today, It's about how it shapes your health over time.
Exactly. The most common mistakes I see when it comes to nuts and seeds are these eating large amounts of trail mix that's high in sodium and sugar, thinking flavored or roasted nuts are just as good as raw, using seeds as a replacement for real meals instead of as supplements, believing that natural on the label means good for the heart. And what's worse, when someone has early-stage hypertension or prediabetes, these bad habits quietly push them further toward risk, and they don't realize it until a blood test, or worse, a cardiac event.
In Japan, we rarely eat nuts in handfuls. We treat them the way you treat green tea or miso soup, small, purposeful, and always in balance. After 60, the digestive fire softens, metabolism slows, the heart becomes more reactive to salt, sugar, and unstable oils. This is not a weakness. It's biology, and it means we must stop eating like we are 30.
So what do? We look deeper at what's actually in the nuts and seeds we're eating. We ask, are they roasted in cheap oils? Are they loaded with sodium or hidden sugars? Are they stored properly, or have they gone rancid? And most importantly, do they support my heart or silently stress it? Because the answer isn't always obvious. That's why in the next section we're going to break it down clearly. The 5 seeds and nuts that are most likely to harm your cardiovascular health, and why even in small amounts they can become dangerous with age.
Once you understand what to avoid, you'll eat with more confidence. And that's the key. Nutrition after 60 is not about fear, it's about precision. Let's look at what to remove so the heart can recover.
Let's get specific. Here are the 5 types of nuts and seeds that can quietly harm your heart, especially if you're over 60. Some of them sound healthy. Some of them are labeled natural. But if you look closely at the salt, the sugar, the oils, you'll see the hidden danger. 1. Salted cashews. Cashews are naturally high in fat, which is fine. But once they're salted, roasted, and packed for shelf life, things go downhill. A small handful can contain over 200-300 mg of sodium. That's more than what many blood pressure patients should consume in a meal. If you're eating them daily, that salt adds up fast.
And the problem is cashews are soft and easy to overeat. People don't stop at 5, they eat 20. And for older adults, that much sodium raises blood pressure subtly but steadily.
2. Honey-roasted almonds. Here's the trap. Almonds are healthy until we coat them in sugar and oil. Honey-roasted almonds often contain added sugars, artificial flavorings, and oxidized fats from roasting at high heat. That combination leads to inflammation higher, triglycerides, and glycemic spikes, all of which stress the heart.
Yes, in Japan we use almonds raw or lightly toasted without sweeteners. Once you add sugar and heat-damaged oil, the benefit is lost. It becomes dessert, not medicine.
3. Flavored sunflower seeds. Sunflower seeds are often consumed as snacks, and most are packed with salt and flavor powders. Many also contain preservatives and MSG, which can trigger water retention arrhythmias or mild pressure spikes in sensitive individuals.
And many people eat them unconsciously while watching TV or on long drives. It's not just what you eat, it's how mindless the habit becomes.
4. Mixed nut snack packs. You'll find these at gas stations, office desks, airplanes. They usually contain a blend of peanuts, cashews, almonds, all roasted in vegetable oil, sometimes with added sugar, salt, and even food coloring. The oils used are often low-grade omega-6, which fuels systemic inflammation. For a heart that's aging, that means more stress, less recovery.
We don't mix 5 or 6 kinds of nuts together in one bowl. Each has a different property. Each should be used carefully. Combining too many with added salt or oil turns healing food into processed junk.
5. Stale or moldy seeds. This one is often overlooked. Seeds that sit on the shelf for months, especially in humid climates, can grow mold. Some of that mold produces aflatoxins, toxic compounds that burden the liver and may indirectly affect blood vessel health.
In Japan, we never store seeds open to air or moisture. They are kept dry, cool, sealed, and always checked for smell or bitterness. If a seed smells off, it is off.
So let's review the 5 troublemakers. N1. Salted cashews, high in sodium, easy to overeat. 2. Honey roasted almonds, added sugar, plus damaged oils. 3. Flavored sunflower seeds, preservatives, excess salt. 4. Mixed snack packs, unhealthy oils, poor quality control. 5. Moldy seeds, potential toxins, liver strain. These might seem harmless in small amounts, but if they are part of your daily routine, especially after 60, they can slowly wear down your heart's ability to recover and regulate.
Our goal is not fear, it is clarity. Once you know which to avoid, you can begin choosing better and feeling the difference in how your heart responds. Let's move now to the seeds that support your circulation, calm inflammation, and nourish your body where it matters most.
Now that we've seen which seeds and nuts may be harming your heart, let's shift the focus, because some truly do help. Certain seeds and nuts, when eaten the right way, can reduce inflammation, improve cholesterol balance, support healthy blood pressure, and even repair the fragile lining of blood vessels. Let's walk through 5 of the best options for people over 60. 1. Walnuts. Walnuts are one of the few plant-based sources of alpha-linolenic acid ALA, a type of omega-3 that helps reduce systemic inflammation. They're especially helpful in lowering LDL bad cholesterol, improving arterial flexibility, supporting brain and heart aging, but they must be stored properly. Walnuts go rancid fast due to their delicate fats.
In Japan, we eat walnuts in small amounts, no more than 2 to 3 halves at a time. We add them to warm dishes, not cold snacks, to support absorption and digestion. Too many can be heavy on the stomach. Just enough keeps the heart calm.
2. Flax seeds. Flax seeds are incredibly powerful for the heart. They're rich in ALA omega-3s, lignans, which modulate hormone metabolism, soluble fiber, which reduces cholesterol, but whole flax passes through undigested, so they must be ground. I recommend 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed daily, added to oatmeal smoothies or even soups.
I often advise patients to stir flax into warm rice porridge. It helps soothe digestion while protecting blood vessels. And it's especially helpful for women post-menopause when cholesterol often rises.
3. Chia seeds. Chia seeds are known for their hydration properties, but they also support heart health. They're high in fiber plant, omega-3s, magnesium, and potassium. When soaked, they form a gel that slows digestion, stabilizes blood sugar, and supports blood pressure control.
We usually soak chia seeds in warm tea or broth. Not cold water. It helps the elderly digest them more easily. They are gentle. And for people with sensitive stomachs, that matters.
4. Pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds are one of the best sources of magnesium, a mineral that regulates heartbeat, calms nerves, and relaxes blood vessels. They also contain zinc, immune and repair support, antioxidants, tryptophan, which supports sleep and recovery. I've seen patients lower blood pressure just by adding a spoon of pumpkin seeds daily to lunch.
In Japan, we often roast pumpkin seeds lightly and add them to soups. They're excellent during colder seasons when blood vessels tend to constrict.
5. Black sesame seeds. Black sesame is deeply rooted in Japanese and Chinese medicine. It contains copper and iron, important for oxygen transport, lignans, which protect blood vessels from oxidative stress. Natural compounds that help lower blood lipids. We grind them and mix with rice or sprinkle over vegetables. Sesame is warming. It promotes circulation. It's especially helpful for older adults who feel cold easily or have poor peripheral flow. So, to summarize, here are 5 heart-strong seeds and nuts. 1. Walnuts, inflammation control, brain-heart support. 2. Flax seeds, omega-3, plus fiber for cholesterol. 3. Chia seeds, hydration, blood sugar, stability. 4. Pumpkin seeds, magnesium, vascular relaxation. 5. Black sesame, circulation and vessel protection. Each offers something unique, and none of them need to be eaten in large amounts. What matters is consistency and quality.
Don't think of these as snacks. Think of them as instruments of repair. Just 1 spoon a day used mindfully can shift how your heart feels and functions. This is not theory. We've seen it in thousands of lives, and now we hope you'll see it in your own.
1. Timing matters. By now, you know which seeds support the heart and which ones to avoid. But knowing what to eat is just half the equation. The other half is how you eat it. Because after 60, digestion slows, absorption declines, and your body becomes more selective. You can be eating the right foods, but if they're prepared poorly or consumed at the wrong time, you won't get the full benefit. Let's break this down, simply. The best time to eat seeds, morning or midday when digestion is strongest. This gives your body time to break them down, absorb their fats and minerals, and use them throughout the day for circulation energy and muscle repair. Avoid large amounts of seeds at night, especially those high in fat, like walnuts, as they can slow digestion and disrupt sleep.
We often serve seeds with breakfast rice or in warm broths, never as dessert, never late at night. After 60, the body no longer tolerates random eating. It prefers rhythm meals that arrive at the right time in the right state.
2. Preparation is everything. Here are a few basic rules. Flax seeds must be ground before eating. Whole flax passes through undigested. Chia seeds should be soaked for at least 15 minutes. This activates their gel-like fiber and eases digestion. Sesame seeds, best when lightly toasted and ground. Whole sesame often doesn't break down in the gut. Pumpkin and sunflower seeds can be soaked for a few hours or roasted lightly at low heat. Avoid deep frying or added oils. Walnuts store in the fridge. Their omega-3 fats oxidize quickly if left at room temperature.
We treat seeds like we treat tea. Prepare with respect. Serve warm, never in excess. A single teaspoon well prepared can support blood flow better than a handful eaten carelessly.
3. Pairing with the right foods. You can enhance the effects of seeds by pairing them with certain foods. With cooked vegetables or soups, helps mineral absorption. With whole grains or porridge, slows digestion, stabilizes energy. With fermented foods, improves gut function, supports micronutrient uptake. With warm herbal teas, promotes circulation and eases metabolism. Avoid pairing seeds with ultra-processed foods, sugary cereals, or artificial sweeteners. It defeats the purpose.
In Japan, we often add ground sesame to miso soup, flax into rice porridge, pumpkin seeds into steamed vegetables. These are not recipes. They're practices, ways to feed the heart without overloading the stomach.
4. How much is enough? You don't need large quantities. In fact, too much fat or fiber, even from good sources, can upset digestion in older adults. Start with 1 teaspoon of ground flax or sesame, 1 tablespoon of soaked chia or pumpkin seeds, 2 to 3 walnut halves per serving. Rotate weekly. Don't eat all 5 in one day. Let the body respond slowly.
We use food as messages. One seed says repair, another says relax, another says circulate. You don't want to shout. You want to speak clearly, one message at a time.
So, here's the takeaway. Eat seeds in the morning or early afternoon. Prepare them well, grind soaked toast lightly, pair them with whole, warm, simple meals. Use small amounts daily. Not occasionally. Listen to how your body responds. It will tell you when something works. Because after 60, food isn't just fuel, it's guidance.
And when you give the body the right signal at the right time, it remembers how to take care of you, even after all these years.
What we've shared today isn't complicated, but it does ask you to slow down and look closely. Not all seeds are good for your heart, and not all labels tell the truth. Some are coated in sugar, some are roasted in damaged oils, some sit for months on a shelf losing their integrity before they ever reach your plate. Meanwhile, the seeds that heal, the ones that lower inflammation, support your arteries, and nourish your heart, are small, unprocessed, and often ignored. So here's what I want you to remember. You don't need more food. You need better decisions about the food you already eat.
And start today, not with 5 kinds, just one. Try flaxseed or walnuts or sesame ground soaked or warmed. Add it to something you already eat. Then pay attention. Does your heart feel lighter? Does your sleep improve? Do your joints feel less tight? These are the signs that your body is listening and beginning to respond.
You've been listening to the Shigeaki Podcast, where longevity is built through clarity and aging is met with care. Subscribe for more weekly guidance on strength balance and daily resilience. Share this with someone whose heart needs a quieter kind of support. Leave us a review. It helps bring this message to more people walking the same road you are. Until next time, eat wisely, stay steady, and let the smallest habit lead the biggest change.